Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. I've got a great guest today from Alliance Defending Freedom. His name is Mark Lippelman. He's a senior counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom, where he's a key member of the Center for Life. And today we're going to talk about specifically about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And Mark is responsible for the most advanced and complex litigation in support of pro-life laws. In his prior role at ADF, he focused on protecting the freedom of Christian ministries, of Christian schools, and churches to exercise their faith without interference. So, Mark, hey, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me.
You bet. Let's get right into it. I mean, June 24th was a pretty big day in American history, at least depending on which side of the aisle you sit. You know, if you're a pro-lifer, this was a pretty exciting day, a day to celebrate. Help us understand what the Dobbs decision actually accomplished, because there's a lot of misinformation out there right now. What did it actually say, and what does it actually practically do?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's a tremendous victory for unborn children and for their mothers. So states can now affirm that life is a human right, and they can ensure that women have greater access to support and resources that they need. So, as your listeners probably know, back in the 70s in Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court essentially took away people's and states' rights to debate the issue and to regulate this issue as they saw fit. And so our country was able to do that, and people were able to have a say, and states were able to act as they wish for almost 2 centuries. And all of a sudden that ability was taken away, which was undemocratic. And then that decision was affirmed again in Casey in the early 90s. But the Dobbs decision essentially looks all through the Constitution, says there is no express right to have an abortion. It reviewed in great detail all of the history of the Constitution, showed at no point was there ever a right. And in fact, abortion was always prohibited or criminalized at key points in our history, and said there just is no right under the Constitution for a federal right to abortion, and it sent the issue back to the states.
One of the things I love about that, Mark, is that what we're witnessing is the constitutional process at work, right? I mean, you know, America is not actually a democracy, right? We do have democratic practices in some ways. We have elections that feel like they're democratic in some ways. But truthfully, we're a constitutional republic. And what I love about this is we're actually seeing the process that the framers designed work, right? Where we've got checks and balances. We've got different parts of our government system, and they're all designed to make sure that we follow the rule of law. There's been a lot of talk about the fact that we never overturn precedent, that the Supreme Court is supposed to just rubber stamp laws that have been settled and previous court cases that they've settled in previous Supreme Court decisions. Isn't there a process? I mean, this is exactly what the Supreme Court should do, right? Evaluate existing law, evaluate past decisions, and determine whether or not they're constitutional. What's that process look like when a Supreme Court can overturn precedent like it did with Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we know it's a big deal when a court, especially the Supreme Court of the United States, makes a decision on a very important issue for our society. And so the general rule is that courts stand by their decisions. There's a lot to be said for culture, not waffling back and forth from day to day from one decision to another. But we know from long history that the Supreme Court, like any human institution, can make mistakes and big mistakes. And so our history has multiple examples of overturning wrong cases, the Supreme Court doing that too. And that was what happened here. And so they essentially recognized, look, we don't overturn precedent often, but when we know that the rationale was faulty, when we know that the decision has hurt the republic, then we look back and it's our obligation to correct the mistake and set the record straight. And that's what the court did in Dobbs.
I love that. And we do have a precedent for this, right? We have seen this historically where a court may have made a bad decision. In particular, I'm thinking with respect to slavery. I'm thinking in particular to civil rights, this whole civil rights movement, the right to vote. I mean, there were a whole bunch of decisions that were overturned and or that were corrected, right? I mean, this isn't the first time this has ever happened.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And so some of the biggest decisions, like Brown versus Board,
Mm.
and others, were examples of this. And so I put Dobbs um, in a pretty good line of cases, especially because this is an issue. If you want to talk about civil rights in the United States alone, there have been over 60 million unborn children who have died just since Roe was issued, and so it's a monument. It was a monumental mistake to begin with,
Mm.
and it was the right thing for the court to do, to recognize that mistake and correct course.
Yeah, and I love it. This decision actually not only supports the rule of law, it supports the constitutional process. And at the same time, it actually validates some of the science that we know today. I mean, I think back to 1973. I was just a kid back then, and this wasn't an issue on my radar. But back then, when this case was decided, of course, they were talking about viability, and which obviously has really no place in this constitutional conversation. But they talked about that, and they were relying on the science of the day. But the science of today, when you look at the sonogram and the 3D and 4D images that we have of what's happening inside a woman's body during pregnancy, it is absolutely impossible to deny that that is a human being, and we actually know what that human being can feel. Can they touch? Are they sucking their thumb? Are they communicating in many ways? They're certainly moving just like a human being. They have hands and feet and toes and all of that. So I think today, this court decision was also a celebration of life, right? I think about our original documents that say that we have been given by God certain rights, unalienable rights that were given by God, not government, rights that can't be taken away. And some of those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Does this restore the right to life within America? What's the practical benefit now?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, just to make a point about the science, at 15 weeks, which the law that the Supreme Court upheld, the Mississippi Gestational Age Act, it basically protected life at least after 15 weeks. And at
Mm.
that point, babies have heartbeats. They can move around the womb. They can kick. They open and close their fingers. They hiccup,
Mm. Yeah.
and likely feel pain. And as somebody who just welcomed a little baby boy, and I'm looking at a sonogram photo on my desk right now. Yeah, you're absolutely
Congratulations.
right. I mean, it's undeniable, and what the court in Dobbs pointed out was in Roe and again in Casey, they made a point of setting the gestational age for when you can or can't have an abortion on viability. And
Hmm.
but as science improves, that line has become sooner and sooner. We see doctors performing surgeries on babies in the womb
Yes.
before they're
Yeah.
born, and then they're later born. And
Yeah.
so that's something to keep in mind with the science for sure.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing now that, obviously we know that a new human being, a preborn human being, is formed at conception. We know it has its own DNA. I mean, there's just some really cool science behind creation. And I think that's part of the reason there's such a big celebration, because we really do believe in protecting innocent, voiceless human life. And so I know that you share that value, and I think our faith, I think in some ways science helps us to know that that is a human life and it's undeniable. But then I think our faith informs whether or not we value that human life and whether or not we are motivated to protect that human life. Is that kind of the other side of the story now that this decision has been made?
Yeah, well, I think you're tying a couple good things together, and there's a consistency between faith and science here,
Yeah.
that the God who tells us what's right and wrong is the same God that created the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of
Yes.
biology. And so we're not afraid to look into the science and affirm it with joy, and affirm that every life is sacred. So
Yes.
yeah, that's it's there's a lot of joy
Yeah.
and a lot of celebration on the pro
Yeah.
life side.
Yeah, for sure. And we're incredibly thankful for the legal arguments that got us to this place, right? Because that's a particular skill and it's a particular gifting that you and others have in, especially on the ADF team and also with a bunch of other legal organizations that fight for life. Um, now we know the issue of deciding whether we're going to protect unborn human life now goes back to the states, right? And one of the things I think that's exciting to some people and it's not so exciting to others. I happen to live in a state, I live in Colorado, which has absolutely stripped the unborn baby's rights to personhood. It has no rights to personhood. Uh, and it gives anyone the ability to have an abortion all the way up to delivery. Some would argue that the legislation that was signed in Colorado and also in states like Maryland also gives the mom or the parent the right to decide after the baby is born whether or not they want that life to continue. It's one of the most egregious laws I've seen in state history against life when almost no one in America thinks it's okay to do that. I mean, very few people actually believe in abortion all the way up to delivery. That's just a kind of an awful situation, I think, in most cases. Now that it goes back to the states, is that where the new battleground is? You've probably seen the maps where it tells you which states are pro-life and protect unborn life, and which states are the ones that have positive abortion laws. What happens now? Is it just chaos? What does it look like at the state level?
Well, it may look like chaos. There's a lot of positioning right now, but you're exactly right. After the Dobbs decision, uh, the Supreme Court essentially handed the issue back to the states. And so you'll see for the first time in a generation, people actually thinking through these issues. There are people who didn't have to defend their position on abortion for decades, and all of a sudden they're
Mm,
having to try to persuade people. People. If you look at polls, people may say they prefer retaining Roe versus Wade, but they don't know what the decision says. And once you start unpacking, are you in favor of allowing abortion up to the ninth month of pregnancy? You're right. No, there are very few people
yeah,
who want that, and so it
yes,
does go back to the states. And so what we're seeing is there are some states who are going to continue allowing abortion, even to extreme levels, like you saw in Colorado and Maryland, New York and California.
mm,
But there are a lot of other states who have acted diligently to protect life immediately. And so, and even as those states begin implementing pro life policies and protections for the unborn, there are abortion advocates who are already rushing to court to challenge those. And
yeah,
so there are going to be a lot of lawsuits. There's going to be a lot of legislation and
yeah.
proposal and debate. But like you said, that's part of how our constitutional system was designed.
Yeah. Is there a way at the state level, will this ever end up back at the Supreme Court, or has this been settled that it's no longer a federal constitutional issue? It's now going to be settled at the state level. Will this ever get back to the Supreme Court? Could a state make a law that is so egregious against the science that it ends up back at the Supreme Court? Is that possible?
Well, I think the issue of whether the Constitution provides a federal right to abortion is one that is a question that I think was definitively decided
Yep.
in Dobbs. But there are all sorts of abortion adjacent, abortion related questions that could go up to the Supreme Court. For instance, um, say you're in a state that doesn't allow abortion, but somebody mails you medication or chemical abortion
Mm,
pills from another jurisdiction. What are the issues involved there? There are postal regulations. There are laws on the books that people haven't thought about since Roe's been around that actually prohibit mailing abortion drugs. So all sorts of questions like that. What happens when uh, you take an unborn child out of a state into another state and commit an abortion that's not illegal, that isn't legal in the state that you're from.
Wow.
So there are a lot of interjurisdictional questions that may rise to the Supreme Court, and also whether Congress has a right to or an ability under the Constitution to regulate abortion at all. So all
Mm.
of those issues could potentially wind their way up to the Supreme Court, but we're very grateful that the big issue of a constitutional right to abortion um, was decided in Dobbs.
Yeah. One of the things that it says to me, I'm big on culture, right? That the environment that we live in, the values that we all share. We used to in America have kind of a shared set of values and a shared set of virtues. And obviously those are under attack today. And life is one of those components. But what I love about the Dobbs decision from a citizen's position is that we no longer say constitutionally that you have a right to end the life of another innocent human being. I mean, I just love the fact that we've said, no, we're not. We actually don't have a right to end a life, especially an innocent preborn life. So I just like what it says from the top level down, that America is no longer a culture of death, so to speak. And now it gives us an opportunity to make the case for why life is so precious. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. So I think uh, there are court battles. Obviously, that's something I engage in on a daily
Yeah.
basis. But
Yeah.
ultimately, as you
How
mentioned,
do you do it, Mark? Seriously, how do
it's
you do it? Oh,
well, there's no more fascinating job. Every day I'm dealing with really cutting edge issues, and it's fun, but it
yes.
is difficult. You're dealing with some pretty weighty,
Mm,
emotionally and morally fraught issues. But like you
yeah.
said, ultimately this is a cultural issue, and the goal of the pro-life movement is not just to make abortion illegal; it's to make it unthinkable. It's to make
Yes.
it a situation where people rally around. Though, if you're in an unplanned pregnancy, you don't know what to do. You're just overwhelmed with help and encouragement and support, and there's a lot of joy and momentum behind that movement. And so I think that's kind of where things need to go next, and honestly
Mm,
where they are. The pro-life movement's been working for 50 years to
yes.
set up networks of pregnancy centers and nonprofits and organizations to help. And so
Yeah.
those are being deployed now, and hopefully that will be something that changes the culture and the conversation.
Yeah. I love the fact that, organizations like these pregnancy resource centers that are pro-life, that give support, that and organizations like Live Action, for example, are just a big voice at showing people what's actually happening during pregnancy. I think this is an opportunity for the pro-life community to kind of put our money where our mouth is, right? To kind of make this the hands and feet of the pro-life movement, and in tangible ways. Obviously, we've got to step in and utilize folks like you that are really gifted at the legal protections of life. But in addition to that, I think we can. Isn't it just a big opportunity for us to actually provide resources that help moms in pregnancy, that helps them after they deliver the baby, that also makes adoption easier? I mean, aren't those all components of things that we can do now in the post-Roe America?
Absolutely. And so it's long been a charge of abortion advocates that, oh, you pro-life folks, you care about the baby only before they're born. Once they're born, you don't care about the child, the mother, the family, their struggles. And that's never been true. The
Right.
pro-life, I mean, I have pregnancy center clients who are just incredible and have provided so much help. We're talking just millions and millions of dollars over years, and blood, sweat, and tears of helping and encouraging women. And so that's always been the case. Um, but trust me when I tell you, they are ready, and they are willing, and they are energized to keep going, and to amplify the efforts that they've already begun.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's been hardest for pro-lifers to see is the level of anger, the level of violent protesting, the messaging that's coming from the extreme pro-abortion groups that believe in abortion all the way up through the very, very end, delivery day, for example. I think what it's exposing a bit of that, the culture of death in some ways, or the elevation of womanhood to make all decisions with respect to that pregnancy, even though it involves another life, right? I believe in, with some limitations, of course, I believe in the idea of my body, my choice. There, of course, are some limitations on that. But that's not what abortion is. Abortion isn't my body. It's the body that's developing within me. And so isn't that kind of a jumping off point for us, that this is protecting a separate life? It's not about principally, it's not about the woman who is pregnant. It's really about the life, that innocent life that's developing.
Yeah, on abortion is such a dark and evil thing that to support it, you have to play with words a little bit. And so
Yeah,
the euphemism pro-choice was always, pro-choice to do what? To murder an innocent human life.
right.
But the idea of saying pro-choice, that's a decent slogan, and people like choices. And
Yeah,
so I do find it ironic that now that Roe versus Wade is overturned, um, a lot of women have an opportunity to go to a pregnancy center, but abortion advocates now more than ever are attacking pregnancy centers, not only in word, but firebombing them,
yes,
threatening the people who are working at them. So the very people, the pregnancy centers, who are providing choices and options for women, that abortion isn't your only option. It's not your only choice. Um, they're very helpful pregnancy centers and individuals there who
yeah,
just say, I'm here to give you any help you need.
yes.
Um, and so it is ironic and telling that people want to shut those down to make abortion the only choice.
Yeah. It's interesting. It really isn't about choice. It's about ideology, isn't it? I mean, I think that's what all of this is exposing, is that they're not in favor of choice. Choice is that happy slogan that every American is going to agree with. Most human beings are going to agree with the idea that each one of us has choice and some level of autonomy and ownership over our own decisions. We all agree with that. But this has exposed the fact that it really isn't about choice. It's about ideology. It's about a belief that they can terminate a pregnancy under any circumstances. And one of the things I think that's really hard to get my head around is that the U.S. is one of only 6 countries that actually has laws that permit elective abortions throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. Still, I mean, we still have states that allow the ending of a pregnancy through all 9 months of pregnancy. There's only 6 countries that do that. That makes us probably the most radical nation in the world with respect to ending human life. That's troubling, but I think we have an opportunity now to maybe reverse that trend and get to a place where we really do value life again.
Yeah, that's a very important point, and one that the Supreme Court actually picked up on. The United States was one of only 6 countries, and that includes North Korea, allowing
Yeah,
abortion on demand at any point. Um, and what's maybe even worse is we are only one of 8 countries in the entire world that allows abortion up to viability, which
gosh,
was 21 to 22 weeks. And so people don't really
wow,
realize that if you look at a map of the United States and compare it to Europe, the overwhelming majority of nations limit abortions after 12 weeks, and people were complaining about the Mississippi law that's at 15 weeks. And so it shows how out of step um,
yeah,
some of those abortion advocates are. So I'd just like to reiterate, if you want to be truly pro-choice, allow women choices and opportunities to keep their children. If you're really
mm,
pro-choice, um, allow states the opportunity to experiment, to do different things, to try regulating in a way that comports with their population, with their citizens. And so I really think that we're moving actually closer to a pro-choice, a
yeah,
truly, a world with choices the more that we affirm life.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think that's a great statement from it. And, I know that the pregnancy resource centers truly do care for women who are in crisis or women who may be dealing with a pregnancy that they feel like they're not prepared to handle, and or maybe a life after giving birth that they're not able to provide properly for that child. There's a lot of that stress and anxiety. But the good news is these centers, these pregnancy resource centers, which do provide women resources and help and compassion and encouragement, they outnumber Planned Parenthood by a ratio of 4-1. So I think that says something, doesn't it? Planned Parenthood, which makes virtually all of its money on abortion, it is indeed an abortion factory. It is indeed designed from its very roots with Margaret Sanger. From its very beginning, it was a racist organization designed to go into poor minority communities and decimate, in particular, the African American population. And they've done a really great job at it, unfortunately. But the good news is that these pregnancy resource centers far outnumber Planned Parenthood in numbers and locations. So there should be a lot of ways that pregnant moms can get the help that they need.
Yeah, that's right. And I saw a really inspiring video the other day where a gentleman was outside of an abortion clinic. A woman was showing up for an appointment, and the gentleman said, "Hey, why are you here?" They discussed it, and he said, "At this point in your pregnancy, your child has a heartbeat." He was going through what the child, can likely experience pain, and the mother just stopped in her tracks and just kept repeating, "Wait, the baby has a heartbeat," and you could just visibly see her mind changing at that point. He gave her some
Yes.
information about a pregnancy care center just down the street, um, and so I don't know what
Yes.
happened. I hope and pray that the baby's life was saved and the woman gets just incredible amount of support. But you're right. There's a lot of inspiring stories out there like that, and it
Yeah.
does say something that the cause for life outnumbers, um, locations where you can end a child's life.
Yeah. And I think this is a big opportunity, right? And maybe this is where we can close this segment. Is this is an incredible opportunity for the pro-life community, in many ways made up of people of faith. Churches have largely rallied behind this, synagogues, the Jewish community. There's many faith communities that are just ready to help. And I've heard some stats that there are 36 couples that are waiting for adoption for every baby that's born and put up for adoption. So we've got people waiting to adopt children. I think is another opportunity is that we can put our money and our resources into supporting the period of pregnancy, right? And then supporting the mom after delivery, so that that first year, or maybe that first 2 years, or maybe that first 3 years is relatively worry-free with respect to what they're going to need to provide the right support for that newborn baby. Is that something that is that the new post-Roe effort now, is to really provide that support?
I think so. I think to put our money where our mouth is a good way of putting it, just in word and deed, to be ready to help the child, the mother, the families. And I'll just share and close with a very quick personal story. Just simply being open to help
Yeah.
can save lives. So,
Mm.
my wife and I, a few years ago, didn't have children yet. So, we're thinking about adopting. We were just open to it. And we had mentioned this to a friend. A friend goes and prays at an abortion clinic.
Mm.
And she sees a woman approaching the clinic and just says, "Hey, can I talk to you? Can I talk to you?" The woman ignores her. And at the last minute, our friend says, "I know somebody who might adopt the baby. I know their names," and started yelling our names without asking our
Wow.
permission, of course. Um,
That's great. I
and
love these
and
friends. They're
and
awesome.
that friend stepping in the gap at that moment, the woman turned around, said, "Wait, you know their names," and the woman decided not to go through with her appointment that day, and ultimately said, "I'm inspired to parent and to keep the child." And
Wow.
so simply just, and this is to our friends' credit, we weren't there, but simply just knowing folks that you're willing to help, that you're out there to help, just, that alone can save lives. And so I just encourage
Yeah.
everyone to do what you can, just to be there for others. And now is the time to show the support that we've always been doing, but it's a time to amplify that.
Yeah, that's such a great story, and it makes me think that if these young women who are pregnant, who are contemplating an abortion, if they just had a little bit of encouragement and a little bit of support, and they knew that there were people there that were going to help them, that they weren't alone, it makes me wonder how many of those lives we could save, even now in post-Roe, where there are going to be still opportunities for abortion. I think that's such a great spot to end, is that we do need to be the voice of reason. We can't be the one shouting and yelling and screaming at people. We've got to instead be extending, from a faith perspective, extending the hands and the heart of Christ and helping people in their circumstances to know they've got the support that they need.
Yeah, we already won Dobbs, and so there's no need to gloat. I would say make it as
Yes.
easy as possible, make as little drag as possible for others to come over to our side.
Yes.
So be joyful, continue being joyful, and
Yes.
continue to help as best you can.
Mark, thank you so much for the time today. Thanks for the legal perspective. Thanks for the, the stories and the heartfelt illustrations you've had. Hey, congratulations on your newborn. Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah,
Newborn?
absolutely. Yep. So
That's
we
fantastic.
now have two, and so not getting a lot of sleep in our household, but it's the
And
best
that's a
reason
good
not
thing.
to get any sleep, of course.
Yeah, exactly. That's a blessing. You can't, listen, it's going to go fast, as you know. It's going to go fast. Hang on to every minute of it. But, buddy, God bless. Thanks so much for joining us today. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Yeah.